Hey everyone, are you ready to unlock the secrets to relationships that really last?
I'm excited to dive in.
Me too! You guys sent in some incredible source material on communication, and I have to admit, I even picked up some new tips from this deep dive.
That's great.
We're taking a close look at an episode from the Relationship Deep Dive podcast with Alex and Lisa.
Oh, I love their show.
They're great. And you know what they compare good communication to? The foundation of a house.
That makes sense.
Without that solid base, things get pretty unstable.
Yeah, relationships need that strong foundation to thrive.
Absolutely. And the cool thing is, Alex and Lisa go way beyond the typical just be honest advice. They give you actual techniques you can use to strengthen your relationships.
That's what makes their podcast so helpful. It's all about practical advice.
Like, get ready for this.
Hmm.
They talk about the 5-to-1 ratio, and no, it's not about pizza toppings.
Uh-huh. What is it about?
It's the idea that for every one criticism you give your partner, you balance it out with 5 genuine compliments.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not about avoiding criticism altogether, but making sure it's balanced with a lot of positive reinforcement.
Exactly. It's about shifting the focus from what's wrong to what's right.
I love that. It's a much more positive and encouraging approach.
Okay, so let's break down how to build that communication foundation. What are the most important building blocks?
Well, Alex and Lisa really emphasize trust as the bedrock of any strong relationship.
That makes sense. You have to feel safe and secure to really open up to someone.
Right. When you trust your partner, you're more likely to share your true thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment.
Because who wants to pour their heart out if they think they'll be criticized or dismissed?
Exactly. And that's where open and honest communication comes in. When both partners can express themselves freely, that's when real intimacy starts to grow.
So trust is the foundation, but how do we actually create that safe space for open communication? How does that look in a real relationship?
That's where the art of listening comes in. And I don't just mean passively hearing words, but truly understanding what your partner is trying to tell you.
Ah, they called it listening with empathy, right?
Yes. It's like stepping into your partner's shoes and seeing the world through their eyes.
It's about going beyond the surface and connecting with the emotions behind the words.
Precisely. Sometimes your partner just needs to vent and feel heard, not necessarily receive advice or solutions.
So sometimes the best response is simply, I hear you. I understand why you feel that way.
Exactly. Validating your partner's feelings can be incredibly powerful, even if you don't necessarily agree with them.
This makes me think about how often we try to jump in and fix things for our partners instead of just listening and being present with them.
It's a common trap. We want to help, but sometimes the best way to help is simply to listen.
So we've got trust and empathetic listening. What else is key for establishing that strong communication foundation?
Honesty, for sure. Alex and Lisa made a great point about how bottled up feelings can create distance and resentment over time.
It's like a ticking time bomb. Eventually, it's going to explode.
Exactly. And that ties back to trust. If you don't feel safe being honest with your partner, you're more likely to hold things in.
Right, that makes sense.
But here's the thing. Honesty isn't about just blurting out whatever comes to mind. It's about being thoughtful about how and when you express your feelings.
So it's not just what you say, but how you say it and when.
Exactly. And they suggested checking in before launching into heavy or sensitive conversations.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So instead of ambushing your partner with a difficult topic, you could say something like, hey, is this a good time to talk about something that's been on my mind? It's kind of important, so I want to make sure we're both in the right headspace.
Exactly. It shows respect for your partner's time and emotional state.
And it helps maintain that sense of safety and trust, which, as we've established, is super important for healthy communication.
It all comes back to that foundation of trust.
It's like all these pieces are starting to fit together.
And now we get to explore a fascinating aspect of communication that often gets overlooked. Nonverbal cues.
Oh, yeah. They talked about how our body language, tone of voice, even facial expressions can speak volumes, sometimes even contradicting the words we're saying.
It's amazing how much we communicate without even realizing it.
Like, you could be saying, I'm fine, but if your arms are crossed, your eyebrows are furrowed, and your voice is tense, your partner is going to see right through that.
Right. Our bodies can betray our words,
Right.
and that can lead to all sorts of misunderstandings.
It's like we're sending these secret messages along with our words.
And sometimes those secret messages are saying totally different things.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these secret messages.
Well, Alex and Lisa talked about mirroring, which I found fascinating. Have you ever noticed how when you're really connected with someone, you unconsciously start mirroring their body language?
Oh, yeah. Like when you're both leaning in, nodding your heads, or even taking sips of your drinks at the same time. I've definitely done that.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that mirroring isn't just a sign of connection. It can actually help create connection.
So, if I'm trying to build rapport with someone, I could subtly mirror their body language to establish a sense of common ground.
That's the idea. It's a subtle but powerful way to show empathy and build understanding.
Wow, it's like a secret communication hack.
It really is. And it all circles back to that foundation of trust and connection we've been discussing. When you're in sync with someone nonverbally, it strengthens that bond and creates a space for deeper communication.
This is blowing my mind. It's a whole new level of communication I never even thought about.
It is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And the best part is, it's something we can all learn and practice. By becoming more aware of our own nonverbal cues and how they impact our interactions, we can become much more effective communicators and build stronger relationships.
Okay, now I'm totally geeking out about communication. This is fascinating.
It is.
And you know what's even more exciting?
What's that?
We're just scratching the surface here. There's so much more to explore in this world of communication and relationships.
I know, right? It's such a rich and complex topic.
So let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back to dive even deeper into the fascinating world of communication. We'll explore more advanced techniques, talk about common challenges, and share practical tips for building those rock-solid connections.
Sounds good. I'm ready for more. It's amazing how small changes in communication can have a ripple effect on our relationships.
Right, it's like we're fine-tuning those connections.
Exactly.
Speaking of fine-tuning, Alex and Lisa shared some really practical techniques, like that 5-to-1 ratio we were talking about.
Oh yeah, tell me more about how that works in real life.
Okay, so imagine this. You're working on a project with your partner, and they make a mistake.
Happens all the time.
Instead of immediately pointing out what they did wrong, you could start by acknowledging their effort.
Oh, that's a good idea.
You could say something like, wow, you put so much work into this, and I really appreciate how organized you are. I especially love how you... And then mention something specific they did well.
I see. So you start with the positive.
And then you gently address the mistake, maybe framing it as a learning opportunity. You might say, hey, I noticed this one part might need a little tweaking. What do you think about trying this approach next time?
So you're basically sandwiching the criticism between two slices of positive feedback.
Exactly. It softens the blow and makes it easier to hear.
It makes the criticism feel less like an attack.
And by focusing on the positive first, you're reinforcing those good behaviors. You're saying, I see you, I appreciate you, and I believe in you.
It's like building them up instead of tearing them down.
And that makes your partner more receptive to the feedback because they don't feel like they're being attacked.
It creates a much more supportive and collaborative environment.
I love that. And it's not just for big projects. That 5-to-1 ratio can be applied to everyday interactions, right? Like if your partner makes dinner or remembers to take out the trash.
Little things.
Those little acts of thoughtfulness deserve to be acknowledged too.
A simple, thank you for making dinner, it looks amazing, can go a long way.
It reinforces those positive behaviors and strengthens your connection.
Exactly. It's about cultivating that feeling of appreciation.
Now, let's talk about different communication styles. Alex and Lisa mentioned that some people are naturally more expressive while others are more reserved.
Yeah, we all communicate in different ways.
How can couples navigate those differences?
Well, first of all, it's important to recognize that neither style is right or wrong. It's about understanding each other's preferences and finding ways to communicate effectively, even if you're different.
So it's like learning each other's language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For example, if one partner is more introverted and needs time to process their thoughts before talking, the other partner can practice patience and avoid interrupting or pressuring them.
Right. It's about respecting that need for space.
And on the flip side, if one partner is super extroverted and expressive, they can be mindful of not overwhelming their partner with too much information or intensity.
So it's a balancing act.
It is.
And I bet this becomes even more crucial when you're dealing with difficult conversations.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, and I almost forgot. They mentioned this technique called active constructive responding.
Oh, yeah. That's a great one.
It sounds very technical. Fill me in. What is that exactly?
It's actually pretty simple, but it's super powerful. Imagine your partner comes home from work feeling discouraged about something.
Huh.
An active constructive response involves really engaging with their story and asking questions that show you're listening and interested.
So instead of immediately offering solutions or trying to fix it,
You just focus on understanding their perspective and validating their emotions.
so it's like super-powered, empathetic listening.
Yeah, exactly.
You're helping them process their experience instead of just passively listening.
And you know, it's really interesting. Research suggests that when you respond to good news with genuine enthusiasm and interest, it can actually boost happiness and strengthen relationships.
Really?
It's true.
So it's not just about being there for the tough times, but also celebrating those wins together.
Exactly. It's about being present and engaged in all aspects of the relationship.
This is making me think about how often we miss opportunities to truly connect with our partners.
We get so caught up in our daily lives that we forget to just be present with each other.
We're so quick to move on to the next thing.
We forget to just slow down and savor those moments of connection.
And speaking of connection, how do we use these communication techniques to handle those inevitable disagreements?
Conflict. It's a part of every relationship.
Because let's be real, even the best couples argue sometimes.
It's unavoidable.
Huh.
But the key is to remember that conflict doesn't have to be destructive. It can be an opportunity for growth if we approach it with the right mindset.
I'm ready to learn how to turn clashes into connections. How do we do that?
Alex and Lisa are big proponents of nonviolent communication.
Oh, I've heard of that.
It's all about expressing your needs and feelings in a way that respects both you and your partner.
So it's about avoiding blame and judgment.
Exactly. Instead of saying, you always leave your clothes on the floor,
Yeah.
you might say, hey, I get frustrated when I see clothes on the floor because it makes me feel like the room is cluttered. I would really appreciate it if we could figure out a way to keep things tidy together.
I see. You're stating your feelings and needs without attacking them.
And you're proposing a solution that involves working together.
This makes me realize how often we fall into those blame and criticize patterns without even realizing it.
It's a natural human tendency, but we can definitely break free from it.
It's like our default mode is to point fingers instead of trying to understand each other.
Right.
But if we can learn to see those disagreements as opportunities to grow closer, it changes everything.
It shifts the whole dynamic.
Instead of, I'm right, you're wrong, it becomes, let's work together to find a solution that works for both of us.
Exactly. It's a win-win approach.
This is so powerful. We're breaking down all these complex communication concepts into something that feels manageable and practical.
That's the goal.
And you know, the cool thing is these communication skills are applicable in all sorts of relationships.
You're so right. Romantic relationships, friendships, families, even at work.
It's like we're building a communication toolkit for life.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And the more you use those tools, the better you get at handling all those different relationship dynamics.
This has been such a insightful conversation.
I agree.
I feel like I'm seeing communication in a whole new way.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
And the best part is we're not done yet.
There's still so much to discover.
So let's take a moment to reflect on everything we've talked about so far,
Okay.
and then we'll come back for the final part of this deep dive. We'll explore even more nuances of building those truly unbreakable bonds.
Sounds great.
Okay, so we've talked about building a strong foundation for communication, and we've explored some powerful techniques. Now I'm curious about those times when communication gets a little bumpy.
It happened.
Because even when we're trying our best, sometimes things go sideways.
Right. Relationships are constantly evolving, which means our communication has to evolve too.
So how do we handle those moments when things get messy? How do we navigate conflict without letting it ruin the relationship?
Well, one thing Alex and Lisa really emphasized is that conflict isn't always a bad thing.
Really?
It can actually be an opportunity for growth,
Interesting.
as long as we approach it with the right mindset.
So instead of trying to avoid conflict at all costs, maybe we should see it as a chance to learn and grow together.
Exactly.
And that's where all those communication skills we've been talking about come into play.
Right. Remember active listening.
Oh yeah, really tuning into what your partner is saying, even if you don't see things the same way.
It's about resisting the urge to jump in and offer solutions or get defensive.
It's about creating that space for your partner to feel truly heard.
You can acknowledge their feelings, even if you don't agree with them. Like, I hear that you're feeling frustrated right now. Can you tell me more about what's going on?
It's about validating their experience.
And remember those I statements?
Oh yeah, those are good.
They're super helpful during disagreements because they let you express your own needs and feelings without blaming your partner.
So instead of saying, you never listen to me, which can make someone shut down, you could say, I feel unheard when I'm trying to share something important. I'd love to find a way for us to communicate more effectively.
That's a great example.
It feels so much less accusatory.
It's about taking ownership of your experience and inviting dialogue.
I'm starting to realize how those little shifts in language can make such a difference.
They can completely change the tone of the conversation.
It's like we're learning to speak the language of understanding.
And when we feel safe and understood, we're more likely to be vulnerable and work together.
Okay, so what about those times when emotions run high?
Oh, those can be tough.
What are some tips for de-escalating a situation when tempers are flaring?
Well, one of the best pieces of advice Alex and Lisa shared is that it's okay to take a break.
Oh, that's good advice.
If things are getting out of control, just agree to pause the conversation.
Sometimes we feel like we have to hash everything out right then and there,
Would you?
but stepping away can actually be so much healthier.
It gives you both a chance to calm down and come back to the conversation with a clearer head.
And it shows that you value the relationship enough to protect it.
It's like saying, this conversation is important, but so is our connection.
That's a really good point.
It's about putting the long-term health of the relationship first.
And even when you disagree, it's so important to be respectful.
Absolutely.
Like, remember that you're on the same team, even if it feels like you're on opposite sides of an issue.
Sometimes it's okay to agree to disagree.
Just your battles.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, this has been such an insightful conversation. I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on communication.
Me too. It's amazing what happens when we slow down and really pay attention to how we're interacting with each other.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one key takeaway you want listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing to remember is that communication is an ongoing process. It's something we're always learning and growing in.
It's not a one-time fix. It's a lifelong journey.
Exactly. But the rewards are incredible.
Stronger relationships, deeper connections, a greater sense of understanding.
It's worth the effort. And even small changes can have a big impact.
Start with one small tweak, like practicing active listening, expressing more appreciation, or being more mindful of your words.
It all adds up.
Those little changes can have a ripple effect, transforming not just our relationships, but our lives as a whole.
Well said. And remember, you're not alone on this journey. We're all learning and growing together.
I love that. What a beautiful way to end this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of communication. Until next time, keep those conversations flowing and those connections strong.